Shall we do a reaction video?
Yeah.
Yeah. I reckon that that yawn might make the cut, mate. Hey, I know it's been out for over a week, and we never did a reaction video to it, but the Texas Chainsaw Massacre film dropped on Netflix. Why don't we spend 5 minutes talking about it, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Hi to everybody. This is Glenn and Ben from the Good Movie Monday podcast. The podcast that returns next week on Monday on the 7th of March. Looking forward to it. But this... hang on. Is it next week? Yeah, it's next week. The 7th.
Is it?
Yes.
You panicked me a little now. What's the date today? The 25th.
I was right in my mind, and then I saw your reaction. I'm like, ooh.
I was like, is it? I'm thinking, have I booked something in for the night when we record? Just not thinking that.
Shit. Well, no, this is going up.
Yeah, you're right. Because fucking February is a short month. What a cunt.
Good night, kids. Anyway, look, do you know the interesting thing about this film, Texas Chainsaw Massacre? I did react to it on a little TikTok video that I put together. I have since gone back and watched it again. I thought I owe it to myself to watch this again. And lo and behold, I enjoyed it a bit more the second time. And I managed to, in my mind, connect it with the original a lot more the second time. That's not. But
is that because you watched the original in between?
No, I watched the original probably 2 or 3 days leading up to the release of this new one. And I don't know. I still don't think it's a good installment at all. Like I still don't think it's good, but I enjoyed it more. I got more out of it the second time because in my mind I am actually going along with the fact that this is a direct sequel. It doesn't line up still. It does not line up. So let's tell people the premise. It's takes place in a ghost town in Texas, and you've got this group of influencers that come along wanting to repopulate the whole town like an influencer cultish kind of commune, I guess is what you would call it. And what they don't know is that Leatherface has spent the last 40, 50 years holed up in an orphanage and is still there. And lo and behold, he gets hold of a chainsaw and just runs amok with it and slice and dices all these influences. It's essentially a Friday the 13th style slasher film. Yeah,
basically, yeah. And they turn him into Jason. He becomes a superhuman and cannot be killed by conventional weapons.
Yes, absolutely. And look, the first point of difference I have with it is that orphanage stuff, because the premise is that he was taken in by this orphanage after the events of the first film. It ignores the second film entirely. But they show you a photo of like for lack of a better word, the class of 1975 when he first joined. And he looks about 15 years old, 12, 13, 14, 15, somewhere around there.
Wasn't that the thing? Like, I mean, I haven't seen the first one in a long time. But wasn't he like the kid?
He's Bubba. He's the youngest of the clan, but he's a man child, so he's mid to late 20s in the first film.
See, I thought I don't know. In my head, I thought he was actually like a 15-year-old, just huge.
And I would love that.
He's like acting like a like because he's kind of like the idiot kid.
He is. He's stunted mentally, and that's why he's a bit of a man child. And
well, I mean, you don't see his face though. When they show you the flashback pictures and stuff, his face is always, luck for some. Like it's as if they know that Leatherface wears a mask, and they don't show you his face the rest of the time. I mean, I guess that was the big complaint with the Rob Zombie Halloween, because you got to see Mike Myers' face, and they're like, bullshit.
Well, there's been a few times along the way throughout the whole Chainsaw Massacre legacy where you have seen his face, and it's presented in a different... He's been given different reasons to wear the mask all along. Why can't
he just wear the mask because he likes it?
Well, that's exactly right. This is the thing. My problem with all of these filmmakers, we've had this conversation off the mic before, all these filmmakers that come along to remake, reboot, do prequels and sequels and remakes, they claim to be absolute devotees and diehard fans of the original, and their promise is that they're going to do it justice. And they never do. They kind of piss all over it every time. And they try to reinvent it or give it new reason. And the thing that made the original, in my mind, so special was that it was really it was guerrilla filmmaking. It was less is more. It was always suggested and implied. The violence was never really there gratuitously on the screen. It was the title itself was the most violent aspect.
I seem to remember someone getting hung up on meat hooks. But
you don't see it. You don't
violent.
see it. You don't see it though. Like you don't see the penetration. All you see is kind of off camera. He holds her up and then plonks her on, but it's from a different angle. And whenever he's hacking people up with the chainsaw, it's off camera. There's no blood. And that's what Toby Hooper had said all those years ago, that they had trouble with the ratings board because technically it passed for a PG. But thematically and all that, it was far too, I guess, heavy for it to have that rating.
Yeah.
And then the only reason he went so violent in part 2 was because of the perception people had of the first one being violent. And he's like, well, it wasn't. And if you want violent, this is what it looks like.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Look, I don't have a problem with it being not as good as the original, because it's never going to be. Like none of these remakes, none of the remakes, none of the sequels, none of the continuation, especially the ones that they do 20 years later or 40 years later or 50 years later, are ever as good or have really are never able to even capture the same, not even the flavor of the original film. And so you're like, so by now I'm over it. Like I'm like, this is like, I knew going in that it was going to be what it was.
That's right. Like the fatigue is well and truly set in, and this is the thing about the whole franchise is us fans for some fucked up reason get excited every time there's a new one coming, but we know damn well it's going to let us down. So I mean, I don't really want any more, but we'll still get them.
But I mean, like that being said, I fucking love the Hills Have Eyes remake.
Yeah. Like, I guess the Hills Have Eyes remake had only had like 2 installments before it to bounce off, not a whole like 7 or 8.
Well, that's it. And look, I was never like the Hills Have Eyes for me was never like a Grail film, like one that other films that all other horror films are going to be measured by. It was just like, oh yeah, so like some fun hillbilly stuff. But when they really mutate the hillbillies, like, and it's like they're the wrong turn hillbillies.
Yeah.
Which I really liked.
But I guess my problem here is like all these filmmakers that have tried to, build upon the franchise and the legacy, none of them have done it in a way that is absolutely plausible within the narrative. Like none of them have been a believable continuation from the first 2 films.
The first one. Although the funny thing is, I get the impression now, I don't know if this movie has been made by a Cine State like organization, but I get I had the feeling through the film that Leatherface is actually the hero, and like he's killing the woke cultists.
Yeah,
I mean he does kill his fellow right wing Texan, he'll rednecks. But
I think that's the point of distinction between Leatherface and a lot of the other movie monsters. I mean, they all to some degree have a level of empathy is the wrong word, but I think we definitely are on Leatherface's side because he is a victim in his upbringing much more than all the others. Like Freddy Krueger, we grew to love, but we can't forget he was a child rapist, right? To begin with.
I'm actually trying to think in the Nightmare on Elm Street stuff, like apart from the first film when they talk about it, maybe the second, but they gloss over that for the rest of them. Like they don't really talk about him being like a pedophile. He's just the nightmare.
Only the first film mainly. That's what I'm saying. And then because he became such a pop cultural icon, and fans and kids were buying show bags and shit, and they had to do that. Yeah. And I think Leatherface from the get-go was always sympathetic. We were sympathetic to his cause because he was the man-child. He was abused by his family, in the moment. And he tried to do good things here and there along the way. I don't know if you remember part 2 when he tries to put the face on Caroline Williams to help her get away.
Yeah, I don't remember that part. I remember him trying to fuck her with a chainsaw.
Yeah, there was a scene where
the awesome fucking the bridge scene.
Yeah,
to me
goes
is
on
like
forever. That goes on
forever. Yeah, like it's an amazing. It's very Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah,
yeah. That or I guess Sleepy Hollow is very Texas Chainsaw Massacre too.
Yeah, but let's back on point to this this sequel. I guess it is. It was gratuitous for just gratuitous sake. I enjoyed
I'm
some
also
of
fine
it.
with that.
Yeah, I mean,
But I just think I think it definitely suffered from some kind of budget constraints, because as I said to you off mic, like it's a whole fucking town. They've got this, they've taken over this great town, and then like 90% of the slaughter takes place on the tour bus.
yeah, well, that's a good
What a
scene
waste
though.
what a waste of the town. Like it's a great scene.
Yeah,
It's very, Hellraiser 3, when they're kind of all stuck in the disco,
nightclub.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
the nightclub. The disco. Uh, and it's great. Like a lot of slaughter it's just a shame they didn't have another 40 influencers running around outside of that. Like that would have been a great addition to some really awesome town kills.
Yeah. But you know what? The one thing that this is what I probably picked up on more the second viewing, as I said, I softened to it a little bit, is that the influences in this one, I went along with them a little bit more the same way in the original you had like the hippies, and then in the sequel you had the yuppies. Kind of they play the same purpose. It's a commentary on the society at the time. So I kind of appreciated that a little bit. And, the influencer culture has never needed a massacre more than ever.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that if you sat down and talked to the filmmaker, then everything, like there's a reason, like we did this because of this, and we did this because of that, and that explains why we've done this. And sometimes that improves things. Like you go, oh yeah, now I see what you're going for, and that really worked and stuff. But I always figure if you have to explain it, then you haven't done a good enough job explaining it in the film.
I feel like this one they were going for a very fan service kind of thing and actually lost sight of what they were doing in trying to make a legitimate sequel.
Yeah. But then again, look, we're both in our second half of our lives, shall we say? And I remember you telling me about was that a customer at the your video store, who thought Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a great film, and she was actually talking about
and she's the world's she's the world's biggest horror fan, and the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre was her favorite movie. And when I tried to have a conversation, I soon realized that it was the remake she was talking about.
Yeah. So if this movie is for those people.
But even then, I think, if it's for those people,
although
that's
I can't
even more
remember
confusing.
How that movie ends.
That's even more confusing because this one has a stronger feel to the original than the remake. But I don't know. Yeah. What I will say before we wrap it up is I do think it's the best looking Chainsaw Massacre sequel out of all of them. I think it was really well shot, and I think there's some really potentially iconic imagery in here. I love that flower field scene, the canola field or whatever it was. That shit's great. I like those little shots of him holding up the skin, standing in doorways. I think they had good intentions with how they were trying to film it.
Yeah. Well, they had a good cinematographer.
Yeah. Who probably understood more than anyone there what the original was all about, because the original is still the most stylistically shot of them all,
Yeah.
And it's the cheapest of them all. Anyway, so I've softened on it. I originally would have given it 1 out of 5, and now I'll probably go 2.5.
Yeah. I don't know where I couldn't give you a star rating for it. I don't know.
No, fair enough.
Like, funnily enough, I loved that it was like, it felt like it went for 75 minutes. It didn't, but it felt like it went for 75 minutes.
It was short. Though.
Which I loved. It's a short, and they don't fuck around. Like within 20 minutes of the film, I think, or 30 minutes, there's, the killing starts, and it doesn't actually stop. It doesn't like take a breather for 20 minutes with exposition. It just goes right through. So I enjoyed watching it. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it in the context of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise.
Yeah.
But just in the moment, watching a unoriginal, no, I wasn't, there was nothing new in it. It just was what it was. I was like, yeah, right. Fine. Like it was, for me, it was like all those kind of 90s, like the 90s, 2000s horror films. So you're like, oh yeah, like this is bringing nothing new to the genre. You've just added a bit of a goth soundtrack, and it's just otherwise it's just a generic slasher. And this is very, very much a generic.
And the post-credit sequence has him return to the house, much like Rambo does at the end of Rambo 4. Exactly the same shot, actually. So I guess there's another one coming, and it may take place on the farm. Who knows? I mean, what's Leatherface going to do once he gets home? There's no amenities, like there's no water. I'm sure there's no electricity.
And unlike well, that's right. And unlike in the first one, everyone knows where that home is.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose technically the only person who actually knows is the guy in the grocery store because everyone else is dead. But I think people knew where they were going. I felt like it's all over social media.
Well,
so
it's all over the start of the
them.
film, telling everybody on the TV what happened and where it happened.
No, but what I mean is in the fact that Leatherface killed everyone, those influencers are all filming it in the bus.
Yeah.
So everyone knows
what's happened. It's gone live.
Happened. Yeah. And they know who it was. So I don't think you can't disappear for 40 years like he did in the first one.
No, and they can geo-track that shit.
Yeah.
Then think about that. All right, mate. I'll see you on the next one.